So welcome to this video on using McLeod gauge. This is a McLeod gauge. As you can see, there's a mercury pool right here that's inside a glass apparatus that can be turned down and up. And the main purpose of this is actually to measure the vacuum pressure of a Schlenk line. So as you can see here is the Schlenk line that I'll be using. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get our Schlenk line all set up. I've already done that. I've got the trap already set up, filled with liquid nitrogen. We've already been pumping this down. Again, you want this to be pumped down completely, at least for 5 to 30 minutes, at least to pump down your Schlenk line completely to the working pressure that you need. Alright, so with that, then you get your McLeod gauge out. And as you can see here in the one that we have a little septum on the back. This is just to kind of keep the mercury in there in case anything happens. What we can do is we can pop that off. In our case here, this Schlenk line, as you can see, this adapter is a little bit bigger than most hose barbs that we have in this lab. So we actually need to use a bigger gauge tubing, so that's right here. I've already swapped that out on my Schlenk line by simply just switching our ball joints here from the normal 3/8 inch tubing to more of the 1/2 inch tubing here. So we can simply put that in our respective McLeod gauge, turn it around. Before you start actually pulling vacuum on it, try to make sure that you have all the mercury down here in the mercury pool, because if not, when you start to pull vacuum and you start doing any manipulation with it, you'll shoot mercury all throughout the whole apparatus, and you definitely don't want it in your Schlenk line. So the first thing we want to do is, once we have this all connected, is that we're going to want to actually turn vacuum to this McLeod gauge. So we simply can open our vacuum, slowly do this. And you can hear the gurgling in there till we're completely open. And then we simply now wait for about 5 minutes to completely pump this down. So again, we want all that mercury to be in the mercury pool. So while we're waiting, any that's not in there, we can simply tap in there. You can see there's a little piece right here that I'm trying to tap into that pool. All right, so now we have that. We can simply kind of wait here until we're down for 5 minutes. So I'll bring you back real quick when that happens. All right, now that we've let this pump down, to get our whole setup here, our McLeod gauge all pumped down, we can now measure our vacuum pressure. So what we do is we have this adjustable gauge here. This top line should be at the top of this open section in this capillary tube. That way what you're doing is you're seeing a pressure difference between the outside and the inside vacuum part here. I have a little bit of mercury here I wasn't able to get out, so I'll put this at the bottom of that to be that. And then what we'll do is we'll tilt this, as you can see here, we'll rotate this down, and the mercury will go down, and it'll fill both of these capillaries, the closed, the sealed one, and the open one. And as you see, it'll start to go up each one. And then what we do is we tilt this until this mercury level reaches the top of that. And then we see where this level has reached, and you can see it's kind of about 0.1. That's good vacuum pressure for any kind of Schlenk line chemistry that you want to do. You definitely want to be above 0.1 or below that. We prefer to be below 0.1, more towards 0.01. That's more ideal for doing Schlenk line chemistry, especially with very air sensitive compounds. So you want to be in here. Most of the Chem 410 ones, they'll be somewhere in here below 1 millimeter mercury. And if you're uncertain if you're completely pumped down, what you do then is you lower it back down. And again, notice how slow I'm going. We don't want the mercury to be shooting around in your McLeod gauge. Tap it all back down in there so it's all back in your pool. If you get one that's stuck a little bit, what you can do is you can tilt back a little bit more. Have it connect back in and help pull it back down there. And then you let it pump down a little bit more. So say we wait another 2 minutes and then you can test it again. And what you'll see is as you're testing it again, if you ended up pumping down further, that this will now be a lower pressure. You'll end up being higher up here. If it ends up being that you've already been pumped down, this should be the same number. And when you end up using McLeod gauge, you want to do 2 measurements. That way you can make sure that you're completely pumped down and then you know your vacuum pressure. So with that, now that we have our pressure, we know we're done, we can then tilt it back and get all our mercury back into our pool. Okay, make sure everything's all in there. And then we go up here and we turn off our vacuum. And I'll tilt the camera up a little bit higher. And then we very slowly add our nitrogen in. So you notice our bubbler there, it's going very, very slowly, because you don't want to add it too fast, because if you add it too fast, you'll be blowing that mercury all over the place. So you see how you barely see anything in there as that nitrogen is slowly added? And you let that go until you start to see bubbles come out of your exit bubbler. And as soon as you can do that, you can then disconnect it, because again, mercury is a hazard. It can cause all kinds of neurological problems, so you want to make sure that you're very careful with it and do not let it actually leave the McLeod gauge. So we'll just continue to let that pressurize a little bit till we reach enough pressure in here so we're not pulling vacuum or shooting any air in it. So as soon as our exit bubbler will start to bubble out, we'll disconnect it. And as you can see, now our exit bubbler up here is now getting some pressure, so we know we've reached an atmosphere. So now we can disconnect. Turn off our nitrogen, and then put our septum back on, and then we have completed the use of our McLeod gauge. We now know what our vacuum pressure is and continue with all our manipulations on our Schlenk line with whatever is desired.